Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we're going to talk about the new Stealth 600 and Stealth 500 headsets from Turtle Beach. The 600 being the Gen 3 and the 500 being a brand new model that hasn't been released before. Now, I did delay this review slightly. It's for a couple of reasons. One, as I use these, especially compared to the Atlas Air, I just discovered that there's a lot of stuff I want to test and understand, and I didn't want to rush the review. I didn't think it'd be fair to just release all my videos at once and not properly test it, because there's a lot of stuff to understand, and it will greatly impact which model you decide to buy if you want to purchase any of these. The other reason for the delay is, frankly, I delayed this initially, but then my dad came in town, and I've always prioritized family over work, so I wanted to make sure I spent more quality time with him, and that's what led us to the timing of this review. Now, this was sent to me for review by Turtle Beach. It won't affect what I say about it. I have a lot of good and some bad things to say because, again, we try to uncover everything, but I will have links in the description below if you want to purchase any of these. And some of them are generic Amazon affiliate links, which will support the channel. Otherwise, there's no monetary exchange with Turtle Beach, either prior to the review or based off sales. Now, starting with the 600 Gen 3, it has a $20 price cut compared to the outgoing 600 Gen 2 Max. It also increases battery life, whereas this one had 48 hours. The new 600 Gen 3 has 80 hours of battery life, and they added Bluetooth. Now, the Bluetooth is not simultaneous, but there was a price cut. So for $100, that's more understandable, whereas the new 500 has a 48-hour battery life, similar to the 600 Gen 2, but it also has Bluetooth, and it's only $80. Now, the 500 has a driver change as well. Compared to the 600 Gen 3, which maintains their 50mm dynamic driver, the Nano Clear driver, the new 500 steps down to a 40mm driver. It's a less expensive headset, so naturally they're going to start scaling some things back. It still sounds good, but the driver size is different. So here's where it can get confusing. And unless you want to say my dongle is bigger than yours, you don't want to get the Xbox version if you're playing on PC. Part of that is because the dongle on the Xbox version, although it's full cross-platform, meaning that you can buy the 600 Gen 3 Xbox edition, plug it into PC, and you can flick the switch on the dongle to switch into PC mode. Everything works great. However, the PC mode game to chat mix does not work on PC. There's no way to assign the chat function, at least at the time of this review, with the earlier software revision. Now, I checked firmware updates. There have been several since I received it, but as of right now, that function's missing. So if you buy the PC version of the 600 Gen 3, that still works on PlayStation. You don't have to buy the PlayStation version, but the PC version does have a functional game to chat mix wheel on PC. This is part of why I delayed the review, because I effectively had 5 different headsets to choose. I actually have another 500 that's not on the table. So if you need game to chat mix, or if you need Xbox support, then yes, you have to buy the Xbox version. If you're playing on PC and PlayStation, just buy the PC version, because that's going to give you the maximum compatibility on both of those. Now, regardless of which version you get, they all have Bluetooth, so mobile compatibility is basically the same. It's not simultaneous, but you can use the mobile app, which is Swarm 2, to adjust various settings on all of these headsets, regardless of which version you buy and which model. Now, the Stealth 500 is a little bit more limiting as far as platform support goes, because for some reason, the Xbox version of the Stealth 500 does not work on PC. It only works on Xbox. So the cross-platform thing is a bit trickier and basically impossible with the 500. If you need full cross-platform support, then just buy the 600 Gen 3 Xbox edition. That's really the only one out of all of these that works on both Xbox and PlayStation, and of course PC. Now, on the note of PC, if you buy the PC version of the Stealth 500, it works perfectly fine on PlayStation, and that does include Tempest 3D audio. Unfortunately, there is no version of the Stealth 500 that has functioning game to chat mix for PC. So again, if you need game to chat mix on your computer, then you have to buy the 600 Gen 3 PC version. Now, rather than just always saying the clamp force is light, medium heavy, strong, whatever it may be, I wanted to create a more objective way of demonstrating clamp force, because it takes my opinion out of it, because me saying medium to me in my head doesn't mean it's going to feel medium to you, and especially if you consider, different sensitivities that we have. So I built a rig to accurately measure the clamp force, and this is down to a gram. It's technically accurate to 0.01 grams, but I round to the nearest gram because I think that gets pretty ridiculous at that point. Clamp force also lightens up slightly over time when you first put it on, because the pads slowly compress a little bit extra. With that being said, the clamp force numbers of the 500 is just ridiculous. It's only in the high 300s, which means it's not really squeezing your head. This number means how much pressure one side is pressing on your head. So, 370 plus grams of force is pretty moderate. It's obviously, a fraction of a pound. The 600 Gen 3 is also a big improvement over the older 600 Gen 2. Now, it's not a massive improvement, but 100 grams of force approximately is quite a substantial upgrade. So the 600 clamp force is rather nice. I could still wear this for a long period of time, but it does squeeze your head noticeably more than the 500. Now, in addition to switching to leatherette pads to keep the cost down, the 500 has some other noticeable changes that they made to reduce the price. The headband flexibility is excellent. This part here is a little sketch. It's a very small single pivot point that locks. I don't know how this is going to hold up over time. I kind of torture tested this. In fact, I'm twisting it with those pressure points being strained. And I went pretty extreme because I'm fortunate enough to have 3 of these, and neither of them broke, obviously, or none of them broke. But over time, plastic can become brittle, so I'm not sure how well that will hold up. The other thing I saw on the price reduction side is the volume knobs are fairly skinny, cheap-feeling plastic knobs. Again, it's $80, and this kind of falls more in line with what you typically expect in this price range. In fact, there aren't many wireless headsets, period, at $80 that are remotely comparable to this otherwise. So this is to be expected. Now they have hard stops, so if just to keep that in mind, set your host volume to max like a PlayStation or PC, and then use this to actually adjust your volume to get the proper control. Otherwise, it may not go as loud as you expect. The rest of the controls are pretty straightforward. You have the quick switch button here, which is going to toggle between, console versus PC. Like, for example, if this is plugged into PlayStation, but you also pair to your phone, just press this button. It'll quickly switch to both so you can listen to a YouTube video while a game is loaded. Now, you'll never hear both at the same time, but you can take calls while you're playing a game. And when you answer your call, it's going to play in the headset and you will not hear any game audio. You do have a Bluetooth button here, and when you first switch to Bluetooth and this light turns blue, press and hold that Bluetooth button to put it in pairing mode, and otherwise it's an action button while in Bluetooth mode, which you can use to answer calls, pause the track, etc. You also have mode. Now this is a fun button because it toggles through your EQ presets because there are several on board. I'll talk about sound quality later, but you get the signature sound, bass boost, bass and treble, and then vocal. And then of course you have a power button here, which is pretty self-explanatory. Press and hold to turn it on and off. No mic mute button, you just flip to mute the mic. This is actually in the muted position here. There's a little catch, you can kind of feel a detent. And then also it can pivot in and out slightly to get closer to your mouth. The proximity effect is going to help with mic sensitivity and warmth. If it's too far away, it's going to sound more distant to your friends and it won't sound as clear. The mobile app actually does let you mute the mic even if this is down, but to me this is much more convenient than pulling out your phone and changing the microphone status. As far as headband and headset adjustment goes, you have limited stuff here. There's no telescoping yoke, it's just that fixed hinge, and it pivots nicely, but there's no rotation. You basically have it doing this only. Now when you wear it, if this is not the right size on your head, the headband pops off, and this is how you size your headset. Because these are 3s on each side, it's not like you have to match it. You could do one in the middle here, and if you just needed a smidge tighter, then just shorten this side. Anytime you shorten the headband or the strap, it will slightly increase your clamp force, whereas a larger head, loosening it, has the benefit of reducing clamp. So again, with a bigger head, you want that to balance out. Now, if you have a very large head, this isn't going to work for you. It does not get large enough for big heads. You want to at least go to the Stealth 600 Gen 3 because this has a traditional telescoping yoke. I still found the comfort to be great. I went with the medium setting, the default setting, and I have plenty of wiggle room here. So most people are going to fit this just fine. Maybe on the extreme cases of both sides of small head versus very large head, you might have some limitations, but this size is very similar to a Corsair HS80. Now the 600 Gen 3 is a noticeable upgrade in build quality and like the feel of the headset. They really knocked it out the park. I think it looks like a more mature version of a headset, especially compared to the older 600 Gen 2, which is more of a traditional gamer headset look. So there's no denying this is a gaming headset, but I think the aesthetics are really nice. Now you do have a rotating ear cup, so you can wear this around your head, and thanks to comparably lightweight to the older one being just over 300 grams, it's still very comfortable and it doesn't squeeze your head too hard. The biggest downgrade, I guess, or a surprise from the 500 is the headband. It's not really that padded. Now, I don't care about the sides. It's really, this is what's resting on your head because of the headband design. It feels more uncomfortable when you first put it on. It's noticeable that's the piece that is not as good as everywhere else on this headset. However, after wearing it for a long period of time, it never really got worse. It kind of still just disappears and you get used to it. So if you're sensitive to the top head being, I guess, a little bit more firm, then maybe it won't be for you, but I didn't find it too bad. It does upgrade to a sport fabric pad. They are 3D shaped, which is awesome. This helps maintain a seal. It also helps reduce some pressure back here, which is where your glasses typically stick out. So depending on your glasses that you're wearing, it's not going to put as much pressure. It's really hard to say how good these are for glasses when you have something like the Atlas Air, which just decimated everything for glasses comfort. This is still an upgrade over the outgoing Stealth lineup because the clamp force is lighter and you still get very plush memory foam pads, which are removable. And that leads me to this one thing on the pads real quick, because I checked this too. If you like everything about the Stealth 500 and this is all you need, but you want the lightweight and the suspension strap, you can swap these pads and the sound quality impact is minimal. Now, Wicked Cushions makes universal pads that you can try, but I do want to call out that the older Stealth 600 Gen 2 pads fit the new 500. Those pads are only $4 per pad, so you can get both. You have to buy the left and right separately, but then you get a sport fabric pad that's a little bit scratchier material, but it is very breathable. So again, if you like everything about this, but you want to upgrade the pad, it's only $8, and now you have a pretty awesome headset for long-term gaming. It doesn't fix your cross-platform issues, but at least it makes it a viable option for long-term comfort. Now the 600 has a big upgrade on the quality of the knobs. These have like a soft, rubbery, hard plastic wheel feel, and they are digital, so they spin forever in each direction. The wheels are reassignable, or at least the bottom one is, so if you don't want game to chat mix, but you want it to hear your microphone side tone adjustment or microphone sensitivity, or even bass and treble boost, you can reassign this wheel to do that. Now on the Xbox version, you cannot reassign game to chat to this wheel when it's in PC mode. I alluded to that earlier, so this function changes and you'll see the default on PC being your side tone. Quick switch button, just like the Stealth 500, to toggle between Bluetooth and console. Bluetooth button again does the exact same thing. Mode for EQ presets, and then power. Now this does allow you to create and save custom EQ presets, but when you use the toggle button, it only toggles between the 4 built-in ones. And then also, if you do create your own preset, it will save to the headset, so you can plug this into Xbox and benefit from a custom tune. However, if you open the mobile app to make changes and change your EQ preset there, your custom presets will not show up in the mobile app. It only shows up on the PC side, and using the mobile app to make changes to this will wipe out your custom EQ. So if you're a big fan of doing custom EQ, then you kind of want to stick to Swarm 2 on PC to make those settings. That way it sticks and you can benefit from it on console. Depending on the size of your ear, the dimensions on the 600 and 500 are very, very similar. Slight edge maybe on the depth going to the 500, but ultimately it should feel almost the same on your head, minus the pad material. These are average to larger pads compared to some other headset models, especially when you look at like the Razer Black Sharks, which lack depth, or the Barracudas, which are smaller as well. And then if you look at the Astro headsets, their pad openings are small too. So it just depends what you need dimensionally. You can always go at Wicked Cushion Freeze pads if you need a deeper one or a different model that has more depth, but this should support most people. The baffle is not padded, so if you're concerned about your ears touching the baffle, it is a cloth cover on both. It's like a soft fabric, but there's no thickness to it, so it's right above that plastic cover. I have a test I like to do called the toilet test, which is basically the wireless range of the headset, because if you get wireless, sometimes you have to step away to relieve yourself or get a snack or check on the kids, whatever it may be. So wireless range and stability is important, and as far as real-world use, these are good enough for most people. So these go about 45 feet before I start having some clipping issues. That's 45 feet between 2 walls with multiple wireless products connected at my desk, including a keyboard and mouse. Now, they both performed nearly identical on the range. When you compare it to something like the Nova 5 and 7, those have a range that are approaching 60 feet pretty much consistently. The Maxwell going almost 70 feet without any issue. So the range is still excellent. It's not class leading, but compared to the older Stealth stuff, not only is it a similar range, but the big advantage to these is they pair and connect much quicker than all of the older Stealth headsets, and honestly faster than almost every other wireless headset I own. As soon as I turn these on, they're instantly connected to the dongle, which is a big improvement over their old stuff. Same room performance has been great for me as well. I only had one time where it seemed like the transmitter went to sleep, and that was on the 600, where I made some changes and I'm like, okay, let's try it out. Then I never heard anything. I actually have to restart Swarm I unplugged the dongle, turned off the headset, turned everything back on, and then I got sound again. It only happened one time, but I don't want to leave that out in case it happens to you, so you know what to do. Just try power cycling, and I eventually got my volume back. You can even quick switch from Bluetooth back to wireless just to make sure that you're connected, because maybe you inadvertently switched to Bluetooth and you didn't realize it. Just toggle back and hopefully that fixes your problem. As far as other things I notice upon using it, there is some side tone hiss. It's like a humming, buzzing kind of sound. It's worse on the 500, partly because I think with the leather pads, or leatherette pads, it makes it a little bit easier to hear the subtle sounds. So if you have side tone enabled and it's not set to 0, there is a little bit of a white noise hiss. Now, if you amplify side tone to 100, it doesn't get much louder, but it does become more noticeable. Both the 600 and the 500 have this issue. It's very common with side tone, so if you're sensitive to white noise and you don't want to hear that, just turn side tone off or set it to 0. If you have side tone on and it's cranked, you're not going to hear it as much if the game is playing loud effects. You know, if you're in a Call of Duty game or you're listening to music, that side tone hiss is subtle enough where it's not interfering with that in any way. On the note of side tone, if you do need to hear yourself when you speak, the 600 Gen 3 has a much louder side tone than the 500. Even with this maxed out, I can barely hear myself. It's fairly faint. Again, that's at the current firmware. This, even at 80%, is significantly louder than this at 100%. And if you crank it to max, you will hear more of your background noise as well, but it is noticeably better as far as hearing yourself. The other thing I want to warn you about, just in case, is when you do firmware updates, if you buy the Xbox version, do the firmware update through mobile if you have an Xbox, or importantly, if you are plugging the 600 Gen 3 into PC, make sure the dongle is set to USB mode. Because for some reason, when I plugged it in with Xbox, it pretty much always said I had a firmware update available, and it tried rewriting my firmware. So I was like, okay, let's rewrite the firmware. It's almost like it's trying to rewrite the firmware for the Xbox connection, because the dongle is kind of like a 2-in-1, and it messed up the headset's performance until I reset it and then switched back to PC. Then I could use the headset again. So do not do firmware updates on PC if you're in Xbox mode. You can switch it to USB and fix it just fine, but please avoid Xbox. And then the same thing with the 500. Do not plug the Xbox dongle into your PC to do a firmware update. It'll flat out just tell you to use the mobile app, at least on the 500. So there's no issues there, but now you know which one to use. Now that we've covered all the basics as far as what these come with, what they work on, build quality, comfort, etc., let's do the mic test. So for that, we're going to head over to my desk because I want to show you the software as well. All right, so now I'm talking to you on the Stealth 500 PC version because, as I mentioned earlier, the Xbox version of the 500 does not work on PC. Now, the microphone here has the sensitivity set to max. It's a little bit softer than the Stealth 600. I also have the side tone completely maxed out so I can hear myself speak. It's also significantly quieter than the 600. Now, what's interesting about the 500 is the noise gate just doesn't work correctly. So right now I have the noise gate turned off, and you can hear a lot of background noise. So if I start typing, that's the background noise I'm talking about. And you probably hear a little bit of a hiss or maybe a fan or me breathing heavily. So when I turn noise gate on, it actually does not fix the issue of noise gate. So let me show you what I mean. So noise gate is turned on right now. In fact, it's maxed out. And all it does is reduce my microphone volume, but I don't get the noise gate functions. So just to put this in perspective, I'm going to start typing again. You could still hear everything. All it did was reduce volume. So if you need noise gate, and that's very important to you, then to me, I would just go straight for the 600. The 500, as of the time of this review with the current firmware, does not have a properly functioning noise gate. All right, so this is what the microphone sounds like on the Stealth 600 Gen 3. It's the same microphone on all versions, whether you buy the PC, PlayStation, or Xbox version, but I just want to say that to keep it simple. So if we look at Swarm 2 software, we can make a few changes. Now, right now, my microphone sensitivity is set to 85. It does run a little bit hot, at least compared to some other headsets, but it doesn't clip too bad. If you are a loud-spoken person, then 85 should still be enough. And again, you want to play with that on the PlayStation side as well. On Xbox, they don't give you the ability to control your mic, so maybe just ask your friends how loud you are compared to everyone else and adjust your sensitivity here. Once you change your sensitivity, this does save for the headset, so that will apply to Xbox. Another big benefit of the 600 Gen 3 is the microphone side tone, which is the monitoring. This is how much you can hear yourself. And even at this lower setting of 70, I can still hear myself very clearly. If I go up really high all the way to 100, it's almost transparent. If anything, it's louder than not wearing headphones at all.
So you want to adjust this. It's just a matter of personal preference if you want to hear the background noise or not. Keep in mind whenever you enable monitoring or microphone side tone to hear yourself, you do introduce a little bit of white noise, so you hear kind of that hiss in the background. If you're sensitive to that, just if this is on, set it to 0 or just toggle it off, and the headset will be dead quiet. Then you have a really important setting called noise gate. Now, right now, my noise gate is disabled because I wanted you to hear the microphone with no filtering. So if I start typing, you're going to hear some keyboard noise in the background. That is the keyboard noise without microphone noise gate. So if I turn the noise gate on, and before I do, I'm going to lower it to only 10. Let's just go with 10. Let's turn it on. I can hear a beep. Ironically, the beep sounds like you're turning it off, so the tone is backwards with noise gate, and it's the same thing with the Atlas Air, the 500. It's just an odd bug, in my opinion. But it does more aggressively clip my voice. Not so bad at a low noise gate, but if I type, most of the keyboard noise is gone. Can't really hear anything. And even if I talk while I'm typing, the noise rejection is pretty good. This is what the microphone noise gate set to 100. Now I'm basically shouting, but it aggressively clips my voice out, and some of the stuff you say will be cut off. To me, it's not really usable, but I will type so you can hear the background noise. Obviously, nothing there. Now, this is what the noise gate set all the way back to 9 or 5. I think you only need a little bit. It's enough to get rid of almost all background noise, but you still sound pretty natural. So we're going to leave it on for now. And I want to go over to the EQ section. If I click this little EQ icon on the bottom left here, you can see the sliders and adjustments for gain. But if I click on microphone, one advantage to the Stealth 600 over the 500 is you actually have EQ presets for the mic. The 500 doesn't give you this. So this is signature sound. This is what my voice sounds like using the full EQ. This is what my voice sounds like using the clarity EQ. And this is what my voice sounds like using the smooth EQ. I think full and smooth are better suited for my particular voice, but you can obviously pick which one you like for personal preference. Maybe just record yourself and play it back with all four and see what you like. I like this feature, and this too does save to the headset. So once you pick your profile here, console players will benefit too.
So now I want to talk to you about sound quality from an objective standpoint that uses measurements, takes my opinion out of it, and it could show you how one headset would compare to another based off a very specific scientific rig. You can use this to compare it against completely different and unrelated headsets or headphones, so I will have a link in the description below. So with that being said, let's take a look at how the 500 and 600 compare to each other. Now, both models have a somewhat different sound signature when measured, but when gaming, they have a pretty familiar Turtle Beach house sound to them. The bass is powerful and impactful, but the 500 actually has a little bit more of a favorable sound signature for me when it comes to mid-range and treble, simply because it's a little bit softer. The Stealth 600 will come across as a little bit more bright and treble forward, so things like the bullet casing leaving a rifle will have a more metallic ring effect to it, whereas the 500 will sound more subdued. The 500 comes across as less detailed on some games, but because of all this, it really depends on your hearing age, which is how sensitive you are to higher frequencies, and what games you're playing. Now, when you compare to the older Stealth 600 Gen 2 Max, that headset actually had the closest sound profile to the Harman curve of the three. It made it more flexible for mixed genres, but the bass still came across as kind of lacking enough depth for some of the bass-heavy genres, whereas both the 500 and the 600 Gen 3 present more and deeper sounding bass, which I think a lot of gamers are going to like typically. There's a bigger scoop at 1,500 hertz on the newer models, and that treble energy in the 4K region, especially on the 600 Gen 3. So again, in certain areas, it's going to come across as a little bit more detailed. Now, I also tested something called driver matching, which is how close the left and right drivers perform to each other. This is really important and critical for imaging performance, and especially in FPS games, where if you want to hear an audio cue and be able to pinpoint exactly where it is, properly matched drivers help with that. And on the music side, if the artist intends for you to hear instruments or vocals placed in a very specific way, let's say dead center or slightly off, you don't want any kind of weird imbalance affecting what the artist or producer's intent was. So with that being said, I did notice that there was a driver imbalance when the Waves 3D audio driver was enabled. So if you disable Windows audio effects in your Windows system settings, it actually fixes the driver imbalance issue to an extent, and it also increases driver volume. Now, as you can see, I took quite a few measurements here because I wanted to validate a lot of what I was hearing. So if I clear all of this out and I just look at the 600 Gen 3 on the left side and the 600 Gen 3 on the right side. This is what I got. Now, if I do no wave on both, you could see how much tighter that frequency response was, and you could see the higher volume output as well. So let me just disable these findings here and look at how close the driver matching is. So if you can disable the Wave 3D because you don't need game to chat mix, because that is a byproduct of disabling Wave 3D, you will get much better imaging performance. It really is like all of these things factor in greatly on which headset is right for you and what sacrifices you're willing to make. Because as $100 or at $100, being a wireless headset that performs this well for games like Call of Duty and imaging isn't perfect, because you have to deal with these firmware issues, at least for now, the Waves audio driver causing that channel mismatch I was talking about. Now, one trick, if you want the Stealth 600 Gen 3 to be louder on PC, but still use the Waves audio enhancement driver so you can get game to chat mix, you can do custom EQ and then just max out every slider. And as you can see on the measurements here, it does increase the volume quite significantly. It changes the sound signature a little bit. For a lot of people, they won't notice the difference as much. It mainly alters the low frequency slightly when you boost everything. However, it does give you noticeably more volume. So all you have to do is, when you look at the Swarm software, to replicate what you just saw in the measurement, I just click maxed out, and that makes the headset noticeably louder. Now, this isn't the best solution, and what it does is it shows that the EQ system built in, or the DSP, has some negative gain baked into the firmware, because they're giving you the overhead for custom EQ without distortion. So this goes into the whole preamp thing. It's a fixed negative preamp. On headsets like the Corsair HS80 or the Virtuoso RGB XT, for example, those don't do negative gain. And when you use IQ to create custom EQ, it introduces significant levels of distortion. So it doesn't alter the peak volume as much, but there's just different ways to approach this. And this is a byproduct of what Turtle Beach did with this particular setting. Obviously, if you want to do your own custom EQ, this is what I was doing for music on the Stealth 600. And for FPS games, I have my own FPS cue or tune here. Now, all of these numbers, they don't really show you the frequency or like how much you're adjusting. So just take a snapshot here and try to replicate it if you want to make your own. I'll show the music one more time. Just hit pause. Anyway, let's move on with it. Now, the Stealth 500 also has the benefit of saving custom EQ to the headset, which is huge, because at $80 to have wireless, Bluetooth, and custom EQ that console players can benefit from, it's really never been done before, let alone actually perform at any tolerable level. Not only is the headset extremely comfortable, but the overall sound quality is really good for FPS. It is bass forward and heavy, so if you wanted to be more competitive in FPS, I did make a custom EQ, and all I have to do is click on FPS here, and you can see the minor change that I made. I just reduced sub bass, I reduced the 62 hertz, I boosted 125 hertz a little bit. You can effectively play with the rest for personal preference. If you found the bass sounded too thick or heavy, then just reduce 250 hertz a little bit, and I'm gonna hit save. Now, I boosted 4 kilohertz a little bit because some people might find that these sound less detailed. Simply boosting 4K by several dBs is going to help bring that treble forwardness a little bit closer to the 600, but again, it's personal preference. Now, if you happen to be one of the people considering the Stealth 500 but want to buy the Stealth 600 Gen 2 pads at $4 per side, I also made a custom EQ for you. And by doing this, it kind of helps preserve some of the stock 500 sound, but better suited for the combo with the Sport Fabric pads that you get on the 600. So feel free again to take a snapshot here and use this in future tuning for your liking, but that pretty much covers the 500. Now, when it comes to subjective quality and game performance, both the 500 and 600 are exceptional, again, at their price range. It's important to keep in mind that we're looking at the sub $100 price category, but I will compare it to a couple others. Now, the 500 and 600 both have a sound profile that tend to excel in games like Call of Duty. Positional accuracy, footsteps awareness, and tracking are all excellent on both of these models. If I had to give one edge towards another model in the affordable price range, I feel like specifically for Apex Legends, the new Nova 5 that came out for a little bit more money just seems to work better for me in Apex. It seems to have a more natural sound signature, and just the way it produces sound seem to be easier to localize all of the audio cues in Apex. Whereas on Call of Duty, I preferred even the 500 over the Nova 5 for Call of Duty, and that's even with the EQ stuff considered. So you can do custom EQ here, you can reduce bass. I think the most noticeable thing is on very complex scenes, such as playing domination. If you have kill streaks, the voiceover from the game voice, telling you how much time is left, etc. You have explosions, you're firing guns, and still trying to hear footsteps. That's where things like the Stealth 600 are going to have the edge. That 50mm driver, not solely because it's larger, but that particular driver just does better with complex scenes. The 500 is no slouch though. When I was playing Warzone or just standard TDM and the game was a little less hectic, or even on the 1v1s in Shipment from a recent playlist, this still did an exceptional job. I didn't find that I felt like I needed a much more expensive headset. When you get into more expensive headsets, yes, some of them can have the edge. You really have to spend like 180 and up to where it starts becoming any kind of a noticeable improvement. These go toe-to-toe with the Nova 5s and 7s, no problem. The Stealth 700s, not everyone's sound signature. It's a little bit bright at 8,000 hertz, but they are more clear sounding to me. The bass is still really punchy. The issue with the Stealth 700 is clamp force. Some people don't want it squeezing your head really tightly. But I find that the HyperX Cloud 3, which has a very neutral sound profile, it's going to sound boring to a lot of people, but if you just play on it, it has kind of a natural, very clear representation of audio cues. So doesn't have anywhere close to the amount of features of this, doesn't have Bluetooth, it doesn't have onboard EQ, but out of the box, whether it's PlayStation or PC, I feel like those are the first line where I start seeing any kind of a noticeable improvement. And then when you get into the Nova Pros, the Stealth Pro, or even I wouldn't even say the Astro A50X. I feel like more the Nova Pro and the Stealth Pro is when you start getting a bigger improvement in positional audio. The Stealth Pros are the reigning champ here. They've been pretty much the best wireless headset for FPS for a reason. But when you consider that these are a third of the price, or in the 500's case, less than a third of the price, to get you like 80 to 90% there for the majority of FPS games, it's great. If you're really chasing the best of the best at $100 and below, I would still stick with the 600 though. As the scenes develop and it gets more chaotic, and then with that extra treble energy, it's just going to stage a little bit wider and sound more detailed. As far as music performance goes, neither of these are that great. I feel like it is more exposed on the music side, the lack of detail and I guess clarity that you get on more subtle audio cues. It seems a little bit more compressed and lacks some resolution. Very common with a $100 headset. I haven't found a $100 or below gaming headset, especially wireless, that I would say is excellent for music. It just really doesn't exist because you can only do so much at this price range. Again, going to something like the HyperX Cloud 3 is kind of like my entry point for genuine music consumption without sacrificing too much. But on movies, these are fine. The punchy bass really helps with immersion. You really have to custom EQ it to fit the genre you're listening to. It's more exposed on things like rock, but for EDM and hip hop, they actually do a pretty good job. So that wraps up this long and fairly in-depth review. I didn't want to script too much of this because honestly, this has been like a week and a half of hours and hours of testing. And there are a lot of improvements here. Now, when you look at the Stealth 500, that's a brand new category. It's $80 to get Bluetooth and EQ. And aside from a couple issues like noise gate or the lack of full cross-platform compatibility, like there's no one headset that works on Xbox, PS5, and PC, it's overall a pretty solid option at that price. The Stealth 600 Gen 3 is a nice improvement as well when you compare it to the Gen 2 Max, which keep in mind, they sold a ridiculous amount of those. When you look at reviews online, the sheer volume of that headset is pretty insane. So when you compare it to the $120 version, the Gen 3 is $20 less. It has less clamp force, not a lot less clamp force, but that was a big issue with the 600. They reduced that. Then they added a onboard EQ, which people were hoping for. They added a noise gate that works pretty damn well. In fact, of the Atlas Air, the 600 Gen 3, and the Stealth 500, the 600 Gen 3 has the best noise gate here. That was the biggest complaint of the older one too, so it's nice that they addressed that. I think my biggest issues with the new lineup is there's just weird firmware bugs or feature bugs that should have been fleshed out prior to launch. I'm not trying to say this to be overly negative, but I don't want to excuse Turtle Beach in this case either. They made exceptionally good headsets for the money on the hardware side. I review headsets all the time, and for what this offered at $80 with custom EQ, Bluetooth, crazy comfortable, great battery life, and a decent mic. Again, wireless for all of that at 80 is pretty untouchable. I just wish it worked better with multiple platforms. Then you get the 600, which, and this doesn't have a properly functioning noise gate, even though it shows that feature. The 600 Gen 3 is better in most areas, but again, I still have some issues with Swarm 2 not detecting the headset. The firmware issues where you don't want to be in Xbox mode to flash the firmware, or you're going to have issues. You have to switch the dongle to USB if you're going to update the headset on your computer. So these little things that I think if they just waited one more month, they would have been even better. If you're okay with some of the issues like the channel imbalance, if you need game to chat mix on PC, and all these little things I pointed out, it's overall still a great headset. It's just going to get better, I hope, with firmware updates. So whether you want to chance that or not and buy it as it is or wait, that's up to you, but I hope you found this video helpful. With that being said, thank you so much for making it to the end of the review. I know this was a long one, but I can't thank you enough for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I can see you at the next video. And with that being said, I'll see you next time. Bye.